Hi, this is Dr. Harold Arnold, author of Second Shift, How to Grow Your Part-Time Passion to Full-Time Influence. I am so stoked because you're listening to Chasing Dreams with Aimee J. And yes, she's a superstar.
Welcome to Chasing Dreams podcast with Aimee J. Aimee believes that realizing a life without regrets is achieved by taking chances, chasing your dreams, making moves, and overcoming your doubts. The Chasing Dreams podcast will help you overcome life's obstacles, believe in your potential, and inspire you to face your fears. And now here's the woman who is passionately pursuing her dreams, Aimee J.
Hi, Dream Chasers. This is Aimee J, and thank you so much for tuning into episode 68 of Chasing Dreams. Today with me is Dr. Harold Arnold, who I met recently and reunited, actually even earlier this year. And he is the founder of The Pursuit of Influence, a social and organizational psychologist who specializes in developing family-focused culture in homes, places of worship, and business settings. Dr. Harold is a leadership enthusiast who relishes empowering leaders to maximum influence through his weekly Leading You Home podcast, blogging at HaroldArnold.com, and numerous workshops. He is currently spearheading an initiative to bring 1,000 Christian couples together for spiritual and marital renewal. And, I don't know if it's kismet or luck, fate, whatever, but I ran into him in Philly recently and we reconnected and he found some time to come on the show and he's a gem and I'm so happy he could come here. Harold, how are you doing?
Aimee, I'm fantastic. And yes, it is, it's just been a wonder. When we met at Podcast Movement 2016. I think that was our first meeting.
It was.
And little did we know that our paths would cross again soon thereafter at a local Philadelphia meetup. And so, I think God's trying to tell us something that we need to talk. So I'm so glad that we are able to do that today and that give your audience a chance to just eavesdrop on us.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, guys, I found a Philly friend. I have a few of them, but another Philly friend. So I'm very excited because, he's not too far. And you're right, Harold. One of the things I was excited to learn was that you published a book, but just earlier off the record, you told me you've published 2 books this year.
Yeah, it was crazy.
That's
really
crazy.
I don't recommend that, by the way. Unless you are an insomniac, I recommend doing maybe 1 book a year rather than 2. But it's one of those things where, you pray for favor, at least I do. And what happened, I was writing this book, The Second Shift, and I was still early in the book, Aimee. Ultimately I anticipated it was going to be about 72 to 75,000. So it's going to be a long book. All right. And I was about a third of the way through and I got a call from a publisher who asked if I would write them a marriage book. And at the time, I'm like, I've already written a marriage book before. And so they said they really put on a strong sell for what they saw as the benefits. And obviously they asked me to pray about it, to be honest. And I went away and I did. And I really did felt led to do this marriage book. And so I ended up last year, rather than writing 1 book, I ended up writing 2. And, it was a challenging process, and we certainly can talk some about that if you think that would be helpful to your audience. I definitely have some lessons learned from that. But even after writing the book, you know what they say, once you've written the book, 10% of the work is done. So now you have the work of actually getting the message out there to the masses. And so I get to do that for 2 books this year.
Well, yeah. And I want to talk about all of it because this isn't even, you wrote 2 books this year. This is your 4th book. You've written 4 books. You have a goal for yourself that we talked about where you're trying to appear on 100 podcasts in 6 months. In your intro, I talked about, your initiative that you're working on. You just have so many different things going on that there's so much to talk about. I'm going to rewind it though and backtrack to what apparently was a past life for you. Before any of this, you had a life in IT?
Oh, you want to take us way back. Yes, my career, my undergraduate degree is in information systems. And for 15 years, I did IT related stuff in the DC area mostly, and a little bit out west in California while I was doing my marriage and family therapy master's program. I was also working full time and doing, we had to eat. So yeah, IT was, it was good to me. But there was something inside me, Aimee, one day, and maybe this really captures it. One day I was listening to the radio. I think at the time it was Focus on the Family. Your listeners may be familiar with that show. But back then, this is in the 80s, so at this point it's in the early 90s. And, I was listening to these guys on the program one day, Aimee, and they were middle-aged guys, and they were talking about so many of their regrets and what they wish they had done, and to get to this point in life and, have that sense of regret and wishing they had done this and that and the other. And I'm literally, I was sitting in the car in the IBM parking lot crying, because I was saying, I don't want to be that. I don't want to get to middle age and feel like I haven't lived the life that I was put here to do. And at that time, while, I was young, I was pretty young back then, but even then I just had this sense that there was something bigger that I was about. But I was really struggling to pinpoint what that is. And, some of that is self-limiting beliefs and a lot of different things. But it was it was a wake-up call for me to keep my antenna up and be searching, what am I here for? What is my why? And, that led to a process that ultimately took us out to California and then to Philadelphia. And, the thing is now, Aimee, I am that middle-aged person now. I'm 51 years old now. And honestly, I can look back over these years and I really feel proud of what I've been able to do, but even more so than that, who I've become, because I've transformed over that time period. And ultimately, that's what all of this is about. All of the second shift for me, all those things that you talk about that I do, all of that's the second shift. So I have a day job, too, that's a demanding day job. But what we do on that second shift can be the difference maker in how we feel the quality of our life has been.
And that's actually, you asked, I wanted to go way back. That's exactly why you kind of hit the nail on the head, in that you had a change of shifts, for what you did. And so I think oftentimes people feel they have to settle. And the fact that you kind of had that aha moment, that epiphany, that lightning bolt, and you absorbed it, you accepted it, embraced it, and moved forward. And here you are, doing psychology and writing books and doing all these things. It's an entirely different position than you were previously. And so now that you're here, because, it's very difficult to kind of make a decision because you have a PhD.
Yes.
And that is not an easy thing. I mean, if you remember any of our previous listeners, Dr. Kyla McMullen or Dozie, all of them will tell you it's not easy. It's worth it. It's not easy. And so for you to endure that journey, kudos to you.
Well, thank you. It was multifaceted, but part of it was really I'm a lifelong learner. And so part of it is just my natural desire to consume and learn, but also to really be able to feel like you have a sense of authority in a space and be able to speak to it credibly. And in some cases for access, it does help in access in some cases. And so, I'm just grateful for the opportunity. It was a blessing. It was for me, it was a funded PhD program. So it's, just being able to get into something where I'm not laying out my own money. And in fact, they're paying me to come. It's just a blessing, and I don't take that for granted. But you're right. It's a lot of work. And I tell anyone, you don't do a PhD unless you can't imagine not doing it.
That's really well said.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of sums it all up there, guys. Keep that in mind.
For sure. Don't take it lightly.
Oh, no. And I say the same thing for lawyers. Anybody think about law school? It's very similar. If you can't imagine not doing it, it takes some time to consider it. But Errol, as you're going through the PhD process and you're studying and you're kind of going through this, did you know what you wanted to do with your degree?
Well, I knew at that point, because at that point, I had several degrees at that point, and I knew that I wanted to have an impact in the two facets. One is leadership, and my dissertation actually was on leadership. It was actually transformational leadership among people of African descent. And at the time, it probably still is, it was the largest quantitative study of Black leadership that's ever been conducted globally. It was I think 113 leaders in 80 different organizations and their followers. And so it was a massive study, and, it was intended to really understand these dynamics of transformational leadership, which is it's a really well-researched model. It had just never been applied to the Black community. And so it was a pretty fascinating process. So, I knew leadership, and I also knew, I'd gone and done the marriage and family therapy program. And, I knew while I was in that program, after 1 year, I knew that I did not want to be a full-time clinician. And when we moved across the country to attend that program, I had assumed that that's exactly what I was going to do. So you can imagine sort of how surreal it was when I sort of came to this conclusion after 1 year, and I had 2 more to go, that I really don't think I want to be a full-time clinician. Mm-hmm. And so then the question is, well, what do you want to be then? And, it took me a little bit to kind of get my arms around it, but really this idea of psychoeducational type of things, writing, speaking, networking, bringing those things to bear and really helping people kind of in the front lines, that resonated with me. And that's really where I've established myself. So while I was going through the PhD program, I understood that marriage and family stuff was going to play a significant role in what I would be doing once I finished that as well, certainly on the second shift.
And that's actually, with the PhD, you end up writing a lot. So
yes, to say the least, yes.
Right, that ends up
reading a lot and writing a lot.
It's almost like even if you didn't know how to do it before, you sure enough by the end of it are adept at it, right? And
and it's a different type of style of writing. It's a different type of writing, but it's one of those things. And in one of you learn how to research for sure, especially the type of psych program that I did. It was very methodologically rigorous. It's a lot of stats, a lot of research methods. And so you learn how to really research and get to, so much of the writing these days, Aimee, and there is a role for popular writing, that's just kind of light and fun. But there's also a role for deeper writing that's grounded, and I think, certainly a PhD programs and things like that prepare you for that deeper research and connecting the dots, kind of forming paradigms. And part of that really resonates with me because just the way my brain works, I'm really into paradigms. I'm really into models. And so, a PhD program tends to work naturally with my type of personality, learning style, and the things that resonate with me. But ultimately, Aimee, I think one of the important points is it's about writing that resonates with people, and so regardless of what style you use, if we lose sight of the people that we are trying to touch, and I think that for me has been an evolution because a lot of my early writing in my first books, they really came more from that. I think they came more from petty. They were more cognitive and challenging, and I'm really proud of it. But it was really, it's almost intellectual in a way. And more recently, what I've been trying to do is to really write in a way that really touches an emotional core with people so they can see themselves in that. And so it's really something that, I say writers write, right? So you just have to get out there and really put that word on, put those ideas on paper in a way that it can touch where people are. And they have to feel that you care. And because, you've heard the adage, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that certainly applies to writing as well.
Oh, I like that. That's really good. I mean, you're right. There is an evolution to writing, and I'm sure with 4 books, you evolved in that. And I kind of want to talk about your books, if you don't mind, for a little bit, and how you came up with what you wrote about. I know for your 4th book, the publishers reached out to you, but as you wrote your first, as you wrote your second, and then Second Shift came about, where did that come from? The inspiration for those books?
So I come from a very strong faith orientation. I've grown up that way. My father's a pastor, was one pretty much by the time when I was born. Maybe I was 2 when he took the pastorate. And so, that's always been my background. And so it was this time, Aimee, to be honest, I'd gotten so obviously I'd finished I'd done the marriage and family therapy program, realized that I did not want to be a full-time clinician. I had gone through this PhD program and, I have doctor in front of my name, but I was really struggling. So God, what? What now? I mean, what am I supposed to do? I know how I feel, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And if we're talking about marriage, which that was kind of my space, it was in my head at the time. If we're talking about marriage, well, what about marriage? There's tons of marriage stuff out there already. And so what do I do? And at the time at my church, we were going through this 40 Days of Purpose. You or your audience may be familiar with Pastor Rick Warren and his 40 Days of Purpose book that was, New York Times bestseller many times over. And, we were going through that process for 40 days. And my prayer, Aimee, during that 40 days was, God, it was one of these, prayers like Jacob in the Bible. It's, I'm not going to let go until you bless me. In this 40 days, I really want to get a sense of what it is that you want me to do. What am I supposed to do? I feel like I've done the thing. I've traveled. I moved across the country because I wanted to be obedient. I felt that was a matter of obedience. I've gone through this PhD program because I felt that's what I was supposed to do. Now, what do I do now? And literally during that 40-day period, this model called Marriage Rocks dropped into my spirit. I don't know how else to say that. I hope that's not too super spiritual, but Marriage Rocks is the model, and the Rocks is an acronym for redemption, offering, covenant, knowledge, and sacred space. And so that was like, oh, whoa. So I spent the next year or so really developing Marriage Rocks. And ultimately, it really helped to define really what my voice is and where my voice speaks. And that's the thing, and that's one of the points that I really try to sell in Second Shift, that every one of us has a voice, and it's unique. And our voice has to uniquely speak into a space that no other voice speaks to by definition, because each of us are, uniquely and wonderfully made. And so that process really helps me understand more specifically where my voice is. And that voice is really this intersection of, our faith and our, and whether it's leadership, where our faith intersects these different aspects of daily life, whether that's leadership, or whether it's marriage. Those would be the big 2 for me. But it's this integration of faith and relationships. It's not just faith for faith's sake, and it's not just marriage and parenting stuff, but it's the integration piece. And so that's what Marriage Rocks is. It puts a stake right there at this intersection of marriage and our faith, and challenges us to, and obviously we're talking about a country and a world to some extent where marriage, there's struggles and, a lot of split ups and separations and angst and hatred. And so Marriage Rocks really challenges certainly those of faith to think about the parallels between, when we think about redemption, those of us that come from a faith tradition, We think about, we have a clear sense of what that means in a faith tradition. But what does that mean in the context of marriage? What does it mean to be a redemptive spouse? What does it mean to often give acceptable offerings to your spouse? What does it mean to have that covenant relationship and have those type of boundaries? What does it mean to have your marriage speak to a culture? Those are things that are not just about the gospel as applied, as what's written in the words of the Bible, or your relationship with God. It's also about your relationship with your spouse, your relationship with your kids, your relationship with your coworkers, your relationship with your employees. And so Marriage Rocks was my first kind of foray into that aspect of integration. Does that make sense?
It does. And what I like is that you felt something that was calling to you, right? And you pursued it. And so for anyone who, I don't want people to turn away because, Harold is a Christian who has a strong faith. I mean, the same thing can be applied to those who don't have a faith, or, it's a different faith or whatever. If there is a topic that speaks to you, don't ignore it. I mean, it could be a different thing for whatever reason. For Harold, it was this, and you wrote about it. And I love that because it's a reflection of you. And that's, that you didn't ignore it. And oftentimes people have these ideas, or I want to write a book on this, or I want to do that. And there's something talking to them, however you want to categorize it, but you got to kind of listen to it. However you categorize it, listen to it.
We don't listen. We get so busy. We want to sound like Aimee. How does Aimee do that? We want to sound like Aimee. We want to sound like so many other people. You can go through these A-listers, and you've heard this copycat syndrome, that type of label. And it doesn't allow people to really listen well to what they are supposed to do. And you're absolutely right. It's not about, I'm using my own voice, and talking about my background and the faith orientation. But the same principle applies to anyone. What is your why? And that's why I keep stressing this point about what is that unique thing for you, that unique spot and space for why are you here? And it's to articulate that. And you're not going to really hone that as long as you're trying to be like Aimee and be like everyone else. And so yes, we listen and we learn from others. But then we allow our voice to kind of cultivate and to grow, to evolve on its own. And we look at the things that speak and we are passionate about, and what we want to happen in the world, the things that, whatever that is for you, it can be real estate investing. I listened to Bigger Pockets podcast, and as I was listening to a guy today, he almost sounds like a real estate evangelist. He's so excited, about it. And that's what I'm talking about. Regardless of what your space is, it's like grab it, and just own it. And I just went to Chicago a couple of days ago, and I wrote in the airport. I was typing on Facebook right when I was walking from the airplane to the taxi. And I have these people ask me quite often, how do you come up with these ideas? And, I just feel like I don't know what I want to write about. And I'm like, I've come up with 2 ideas between the plane and the taxi, just by observing and seeing things and I have to make a note. So I don't forget this great idea. And so it's like with that sense of inquisitiveness, look and observe and think about what matters to you. And I think when you do that, it'll come naturally. And, and if I can just say this one point, Aimee, when I was in this PhD program, one of my advisors, he says, he's talking, well, this is how, the big issue is, right, how you come up with your dissertation, right? And this has got to be some unique work that nobody has ever done before, right? It feels so daunting. Nobody in human history has ever done this before. How am I supposed to do that? And you want an answer. You want somebody to tell you what the topic should be. What are you supposed to do? Give you that one thing that, and his response was, you don't find your dissertation, it finds you. What? What do you mean?
It's the nightmare answer.
Not satisfying at all. That is not the response I want to hear. Right. And, but it's so, and they tell you, you just keep reading and just listening, and it will find you. And you know what? And that was certainly my experience. You read and you read and you read till you feel like you can't read anymore. And then one day that it really does feel like an epiphany. And I think a lot of what we're talking about is that same dynamic. Sometimes we can try so hard to nail something down, and it takes away from our ability to just listen well and follow the signs and then, accept those aha. Maybe it doesn't look like what you originally thought it was going to be, right? And so it's about listening well.
And, when we had a conversation, when we reconnected at the podcast meetup, we talked about something that really kind of stuck with me, and how so many people try and suffer from copycatting, imposter syndrome, and just, feeling that way. And oftentimes they want a layout, okay, tell me, ABC, what am I supposed to do? Mm-hmm. What is it I need to do to kind of make this happen? It happens with podcasts, book writing, right. A number of different areas. And the thing is, for me, I think you hit the nail on the head. What is it for that person? For each individual, it's different. And what is it about you that you can bring to the ABC? Because then it becomes A prime, B prime, C prime. And I'm bringing my nerdiness there with that, right? Because it changes, it transforms, and that it becomes different. That's why, Harold may have an idea for one thing. I may have an idea for one thing. But it's different because I'm going to put my spin on it and he's going to put his spin on it. That's why niches are so important. That's why doing your own thing is so important. And the thing is, and Harold, tell me if you've seen this. It's a shame when people don't try and do things their own way, because I think the perspective each person brings, to the table, so to speak, shapes the world, the country, everybody's day to day. Exactly.
Use an example in my world, right? I spend a lot of time working with marriages, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of consternation, yes, and a lot of them don't make it, and a lot of them that still together really are not together. And so, it's this notion of, so often the individuality, the issue is that I want my wife to be like me, right? If she was like me, everything would be better, right? Yeah. We would get along so much better because my thinking about this is really the right way. Well, wrong, try again, right? And it sounds silly even saying it that way, right? When we first were attracted to the person, we were because there's the differences and the things with, it feels so complimentary, right? Because everything when my weaknesses, wow, that's her strengths, right? But then over the course of marriage, those things that are different irritate me, rub me the wrong way. And I want her to be more like me. Right. And so, but what happens when you do that? Well, I don't grow. I don't become the person that I should become because I want to take away that force that is really there to help shape me and vice versa. So it's the differences that really help to cultivate the optimal Harold. And the same thing applies out in these contexts that we're talking about, the leadership space, personal development space. All of these things, we need those unique voices. And, and when we are able to do that, even in an example with my latest book with The Unfair Advantage, the publisher comes to me and asks for a marriage book. Well, I'm like, there's tons of marriage books out there already. I don't know that I feel compelled, including my own. I don't know that I feel compelled to write another marriage book. But when they asked me to really reflect on and pray about it, then I went away and I'm like, and this thing that dropped in my spirit it is unique to my knowledge or the publisher's knowledge has ever taken that tack on marriage about the unfair advantage. And it's because, it's not drawing, it's the field of marriage, but it's like you said, it's, really allowing that in listening well and allowing what's in you. And, part of that is because you've consumed good, you've consumed knowledge. You've been listening to tons of podcasts. You've been reading tons of books. You've been, reading blogs and all of this stuff. Well, take all of that and synthesize it and let it speak, in your own voice. And when you do that, it's going to be different. than anyone else's. And that's what I would encourage. That's what we need. And without that, the world is not as optimal as it could be.
Harold, when you felt that calling, felt that inspiration that you had, what would you recommend to people who are struggling or trying to find out what that is for them? Any suggestions on what they could do to kind of, I don't know, speed it along, but like kind of get in, I don't know if you can, but get in the right zone.
I think that there's a lot of things you can do. And I talk a lot about it in Second Shift too. The sections are listen, love, and lead. And I think each of those is part of the answer. And we've been talking a lot about the listen part, because it's about listening to, it's about listening to others, smart people, and hearing ideas and becoming a smarter person yourself. But it's also about listening internally to really what makes you tick and what do you really care about. And I can give an example. Sometimes what it is that we really care about, we can't figure out how to monetize it, or whatever. We don't see people monetizing it or whatever. And so for whatever reason, we oftentimes will suppress what really does matter to us because we don't see other people doing it. And what I'm saying is just listen to it, and go with it. So it's listening to smart people out there who are doing great things and learn. And then also listening to your own self. For me, that has a faith component to it as well. But it's also listening to those with whom, in your circle of influence, getting in the right circle, those, Jim Rohn, you often hear that whole Jim Rohn thing about the 5 people with whom you spend the most time. Yep. And, it's finding those 5 people for you. Many of us, and I talk about in the book, many of us need to change our fave 5. We need to, some of those people that we're spending so much time with, they are not the people that are really cultivating those dreams that they need to chase. And so we need to, replace some of these 5 people. And sometimes that's family, sometimes that's longtime friends. And so as we change that circle, then I think, and listen well, I think all of those things are going to help shape what it is that you have to say. But then you have to, I don't think it's an epiphany where it just becomes so clear in one day for most of us. I think it's the process of doing the work. As you listen, then you start doing the work. And then part of that, as you listen, then it's who are the people who need to hear that? And that's where that love component comes in, Aimee. Who are the people that you care about and you want to see a transformation in their lives? Who do you love? And so, use what it is that matters to you to reach the people that matter to you. And when you do that, that is the epitome. That's the essence of what leadership is really about. It's about doing the things that really matter to you for the people that really matter to you. I think that's the greatest testament to true leadership.
Harold, you said something there that actually just kind of stuck with me. It was the part about, kind of focusing on the people that matter to you, people you love. And that's actually why Chasing Dreams, for those who know the story, have heard me talk about it before, began. I mean, I started because I wanted to do something for my little cousins and younger people around me who don't get exposure to others in different areas and things like that. And it's had more of an impact on me than I thought it would and has, done more than I thought it would just by doing it the way I want to do it. And it's amazing. Yeah.
No, exactly. It's the step, right? It's one of these things, and we hear it all the time in the influencer space, personal development space. It becomes clear after you step. And obviously, you can look at that from a faith perspective or you can look at that from a secular perspective. But regardless, it's the same principle. So many people want clarity before they move. And I don't think that's the way the universe works for us. I don't think that's the way God works for us. And so I think, when I love this, one of the vignettes I talk about in the book is when this guy approaches Mother Teresa, and he asked her, to pray for him. And, she asked, well, how do you want me to pray? What do you want me to pray for? And he said, to pray for clarity, and she's like, clarity. She's like, I'm not going to pray for clarity for you. And he's like, what do you mean? She's like, I've never had clarity. He's like, well, you always seem like you've known and you've had. And she's like, I've never had clarity. All I can say, that I've had is trust, and so I will pray that you have trust, that you trust. And that, I think, is what speaks to a lot of us. We want clarity because that helps us feel secure, right? That's the psychologist in me, speaking. We want that security. But the risk that, you have to go out there and take that step and chase those dreams in all with the fears that it often invokes, in order to really discover. And as you take those steps, things become clearer, right? And so that's why chasing dreams, is expanding your territory and bringing you before great men and women, because you took that step.
Yeah. And, you just keep hitting these cold things, because I think you're right if you stay in the same place, you get the same view, right? You can't change your view unless you take that step.
Right. That's exactly right. Our comfort zone is our grave. That's the bottom line. And so many of us really struggle. And, some of that is because of things we've endured and some hurtful things that's happened in our past and some rejections. I mean, it's a multiplicity of reasons that can be the case. But, the bottom line is we need someone. And that's why those 5 people are so important. We need someones that can help push us out of our comfort zone, because it is the rare person, Aimee, that pushes themselves out of the comfort zone. Usually it's a circumstance. Sometimes it's the job that let you go when you weren't ready to be let go, right? And so that pushed you out of a comfort zone. You had to take a step that you wouldn't have taken otherwise. And you can go through a myriad of similar examples. And sometimes it's spouses that can push you out of your comfort zone. But growth does not happen in the comfort zone. Growth only happens in the discomfort zone. That's one of the points that I spend quite a bit of time emphasizing in Second Shift, that we have to grow. We have to, and we can only do that as we really embrace this idea of being uncomfortable, and I love this Mario Andretti quote I've heard. He said, if I'm not scared, I'm not going fast enough. I mean, he's a race car driver, for those who may not know, one of the most famous ever Indy drivers. So he says, if I'm not scared, I'm not going fast enough. Wow. Well, that speaks volumes to all of us, doesn't it? I mean, if we live that way, where if we know that we're going to be on this kind of precipice frequently of, is this too big for me? What is this whole, so many of us in this influence space, and, we've heard this whole 10X idea. What do you think that's about? Why is that effective? Right? It's because people realize that you can't use the old systems that you've used before that you perfected in your comfort zone and 10X what it is that you currently do. You have to come up with a better system. You have to push yourself out. You're probably going to have to network and connect with people in a way that you never have. And, just to use that practical example that you mentioned at the top of the show, with this 1,000 couples that I am spearheading an initiative to bring together 1,000 Christian couples for a spiritual awakening in marriage. 1,000 Christian couples, Aimee, that's crazy. I mean, I do good, and people that do what I do, if we bring together 100 people, we're like doing a happy dance down the street, right? I mean, we think that we've hit the boatload of success. And so 1,000, well, that's a 10X, right? And at that 10X, I know there's no way that I can do that in my comfort zone. It demands something of me. But as hard and daunting as that is, it also is going to be where my growth comes.
I mean, that's a challenge, and I'm so excited, and we'll definitely have to check back in to see how that's going. Do you have like a time limit you're setting for yourself, or you're just kind of
Yeah, no, we had phase one of it a couple weeks ago in October of 2016. And phase one was in DC, and it was a small group, a team of people that I pulled together to share the vision. And, there was a lot of enthusiasm about it. So October of 2017, we're going for 500 couples. And then October of 2018, 1,000 couples. So there'll be more. We don't have the landing page and stuff up yet. We're still trying to nail down some details, of logistical details. But yeah, I'll definitely keep you informed of how it's going. But the big point here is, what is that for you? What is that for Aimee? What is that for every individual listener? Each of us has that 1,000 couples. It's being able to own that and articulate that. And then take that step towards that makes all the difference.
And guys, that's great point, especially with the new year coming up, 2017 around the corner. A lot of people are very focused on New Year's, new beginnings. So maybe start thinking about that, seeing how it goes. And Harold, before we wrap up, one thing I have to ask, there's been so many great advice in here. What is something you would tell someone who's chasing their dream, whether it be a resource, a piece of advice, something they should do?
Yeah, I think, what is it? Never give up. Never, ever give up. I think the thing is that it isn't really as much about what you achieve. It really isn't. That's the thing. And, I'm an achiever. And so it's a little unnerving to even say that. So whatever that thing is, we can get so focused on, did we achieve it or did we not? But that's not really the ultimate point. The real ultimate point, Aimee, is who you become. That's the key. And it's important that you become your best self. You need to become your best self for you, for your family. If you have children, for your children, you're a testimony to them. Just like you talked about your family and nieces, nephews, I think you were saying, or cousins. And, your testimony speaks volumes to them. So it's not even just what you say, it's what they see in you. And that is going, and I think about my kids. A lot of this second shift for me and my drive and, my persistence and keep doing it, day in and day out. I want my kids I want them to see something in their dad. I want them to, throughout for the rest of their lives, and after I'm gone, I want that to be in them like I think right now of my grandmother. I have the images of her burned in my head. I see her in the kitchen and sacrificing and doing stuff for people. Just she won't stop. She just keeps doing for them and doing for them. And that speaks to me. That's what drives me. I think of my dad, who, does his day job. He did his day job for 40 years in a factory, but then he goes and pastors in a church and, day in and year out and decade in and decade out with persistence. That's what I want. That's the way I want my kids to think about me, the things, and I pray that they be leaders in their generation. And I want them to remember, this is what, this isn't just what my dad achieved, it's who my dad became. And I think if all of us can kind of own that part of becoming our best selves, then we're going to get to that point, like that radio show that I was focused on the family when I was telling you about. Whatever that mark is for you, you're going to feel good about that life in retrospect. Looking back, you're going to feel good with what the opportunities that you had and the person you became and the people you impacted. And at the end of the day, that's what is really going to matter.
I never know why I try to speak afterwards, because that's really a great way to end it. Guys, not only should you listen to what Harold was saying there, but also check out his book, The Second Shift, and also check out his blog. He puts up articles on there that have some great posts on leadership and personal development that you should be checking out, all of which will be on the show notes page. Harold, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing this knowledge. I know I got a lot out of this, and hopefully our listeners did as well.
Aimee, thank you so much for having me. I wish God's greatest blessings on you and all that you're doing and all you're becoming. And I really appreciate the opportunity to share with your audience.
And guys, you were listening to Dr. Harold Arnold. Fantastic, gentlemen. So happy I was finally able to get him on the show. Lots of great advice that you guys should either re-listen to the episode to get or check out the show notes page where all the links will be, as well as a summary of the lessons he was talking about. And you can find that over at chasingdreamshq.com/episode 68. And I just want to take a quick moment to reiterate his last piece of advice, the two parts. 1, never, ever, ever give up. And 2, don't always be so focused on the end goal, the result, the dream. It's the last part of your dream, right? Think about the journey. It is about the dream chase. It's about your process and your time getting there. Okay. That's just as important as getting to the end. So remember that, keep that in mind. And till next time, guys, keep chasing.
Thank you so much for listening to Chasing Dreams. Aimee would love to connect with you and hear all about your pursuit of chasing your dreams. Connect with her on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram via @ChasingDreamsHQ. Or you can find Aimee on Twitter @AimeeJ21. That's AIMEEJ21. Be sure to visit headquarters over at ChasingDreamsHQ.com for more inspiration, motivation, and resources to help with your own dream chase. We hope you'll join Aimee next week, and until then, keep chasing.